Hello, and welcome to our Punch Drunk Loves, a podcast celebrating the films we adore. I am your host, Neil Bolt. On our Punch Drunk Loves, I am joined by a guest who brings a film that they love so much it leaves them punch drunk. Our combined task is then to discuss why that love exists and celebrate it, really. My guest this week is PlayStation Universe Senior Editor and member of the PlayStation Unchained podcast, Garri Bagdasarov. Garri, welcome. How are you?
I am pretty damn good. Thank you for pronouncing my name correctly, too.
I've been on podcasts with you in the past. I should know by now. Yeah, I remember we used to have that running joke about mispronouncing it, but
yeah.
I remember
it's
the
still
right
nice
way.
to hear sometimes.
Yeah, when you do podcasting long enough, it does get to the point where you get names come up and you're like, I've got to say this right. I've got to say this right. I don't want to get it wrong. Like that. The episode I recorded before this one was with Jay Krieger, and we were talking about The Night Comes For Us. And, Timo's, see, I can't even say it now. His name comes up, and I was like, I remember to say it right. Got to remember to say it right. I think I said it right twice out of 5 attempts, in the first half now. It's like, which is, even though it's really simple when you sort of break it down, names are one of those things that you spend so long reading a lot of stuff that you often just forget how it's actually pronounced, that.
The Night Comes For Us too, man. It's a phenomenal movie. I love that movie.
Yeah, and that was a good sort of setup for the way this podcast works, I think, because it was a good back and forth chat about the different things it does. A good sort of indicator that it doesn't have to be all about classic movies in the traditional sense of your big tentpole franchises, the revered critical darlings. It's stuff that you just genuinely have such great affection for that sort of goes beyond that rating system.
Oh, absolutely. There's so many movies that I love that critics despise.
Yeah.
As you probably know with DC movies for me.
That's it.
It's just a personal thing,
Yeah, that's it. And that's why I wanted to do this, as a podcast. Was it's nice to hear the passion people have for the movies they love, and then I sort of come into it with that, and sort of get to understand the movie in a different way, maybe even get to earn a new appreciation. I think the movie we're going to be talking about today is very much an example of that. But before we sort of get there, I've got to do the arbitrary thing of asking you a few general questions as a first-time guest, just to sort of get to know your cinematic palette, if you will. So we always start off with the first film memory that you have.
First film memory? Friday the 13th.
Wow.
Quite honestly, yeah. It was kind of my introduction to horror, which is my favorite genre. But yeah, they always had like reruns running on TV when we came to America as immigrants, so we didn't have a lot of stuff, but we had like basic TV, and for some reason Friday the 13th up to its sequels, I don't remember how many there were. I think they're up to 6 at the time. They just played them randomly throughout the day. I don't even know what channel it was or anything, but Friday the 13th was literally, I believe, my first memory of watching a movie. I don't even remember which part. I think it was part 2. Was the one, and then I found out, there's a part 1, and then I got all pissed off because Jason wasn't in. I was like, what is this shit? But yeah, that franchise was kind of the starting point for a lot of things for me. So
and I mean, that's where better to start in horror than having an icon like that. It's and this year is a great year for that because October has a Friday the 13th this year as well. So maybe we'll get used to something new if we're lucky in that franchise.
It's so sad that franchise is in such a terrible state right now. Greedy, selfish people fighting over what? I don't even understand.
I know, with everything else going on in the background, it's a bit of an unfortunate situation. But they're getting close to resolving stuff, and we're getting that series. So hopefully,
yeah,
it'll be back at some point. Right. So on to question 2 of 4 is what is your favorite genre?
Oh well, like I said, horror.
Yeah.
Horror has been
Yeah, we're 2 for 2, I think, so far on this.
for the longest time. It always like people just seem to get grossed out and annoyed by a lot of horror stuff. I think I've become so desensitized to it that it doesn't affect me
Yeah.
anymore. um, yeah, like the only movies like honestly that affected me horror wise, like to me, like the violence, the gore, the supernatural stuff doesn't affect me more as much. I guess as real life stuff.
Yeah.
Like to me, the real horror is, um, what's that movie? Oh, the drug movie after Train Spotting that they did, Requiem for a Dream.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
movie to me is horror. Like I can't watch that movie anymore. Like I watched it once. Actually, I watched it like 3 times, and I can't do it anymore. That's a terrifying movie for me because it's
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. It
I don't
is.
want to say it's more real because obviously death, murder, all that is real, but that to me is more terrifying than what I see in horror movies these days. Because I guess I can distinguish between reality and fiction, or fiction and nonfiction between those two. You
Yeah.
know, like the Evil Dead stuff, obviously not really real as far as I know. I know people believe demons and all that, but until you see it yourself, it's very easy for me to distinguish between the two.
That's
Um,
it. Yeah. If you can relate to something on a very personal level, it becomes a lot more, and you're right. There are films that are not in the slightest bit horror that just hit so hard. I think
mhm.
one of the most recent examples was the Anthony Hopkins Oscar winner, The Father. Yeah, where it's about his journey through Alzheimer's and dementia, like how it affects his brain, and you get to see that, how jumbled up everything is and how it doesn't make sense to him, and it's just terrifying. When you've ever experienced that with someone, it's one of those things where you just look at it and go, "Oh my God, that's terrible." Similarly, the Riz Ahmed film, The Sound of Metal. For me, being like half deaf for my entire life, for someone to suddenly go deaf like that and just go through that process, and the way they captured it really just, it sent chills up my spine. And as you say, in both cases, films that aren't really horror in any way, shape, or form, but they just get it. They get that thing. I suppose the one I always go to as like my go-to one is Where the Wind Blows, which is by Raymond Briggs, who created that charming The Snowman cartoon, and it's an animated film just about a doddering old couple in what will become like a nuclear apocalypse, and it's just the naivety about who they are and what they don't understand about what's going on and how badly they fuck it up because of that, and it's just horrifying, like that. I mean, the point there is, it is kind of supposed to be horrifying, but it's done in that. If you've ever like seen like your grandparents or something like that, and the way they can be, and you just imagine them in that situation, and you're just like, oh God, Christ, like that. It's horrid, just horrid to get that, and that is just the rawest form of horror.
Yeah,
The horror we
sure.
like is very much just entertainment at this point.
It is unfortunate. Like I always strive to find something that will, I don't know, maybe give me some kind of, like chill down my spine or something. And there are some movies where there are scenes that have it.
Oh yeah.
But to really mess me up, I guess I can say, for like a lot of movies do for a lot of people. Like my friend, he and I and a couple of our other friends, we all watched Hereditary together,
Yeah.
and he refuses to watch horror anymore because of the little girl and the clicking noises that she made. That's what terrified him the most. Like it wasn't everything in the movie, but that noise just he couldn't stand it anymore. He left during the movie. He's like, I'm
Wow.
not watching this anymore.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, and that was another great movie. That's it's hard. It's hard. Like that's one of the closest movies that I've gotten to where it's a little unsettling.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I talk about horror with my friends all the time. It's gotten so hard to really scare people these days
Yeah.
because of the reliance on CG and the fact that people just kind of aren't afraid of things like this anymore. Back in the day, like, your parents told you stories like the boogeyman will get you if you don't do this or that.
That's it.
They had a bigger impact. Now people, like, they have access to so much information with the internet and their phones. Like, it just doesn't have that same effect because people aren't afraid of that stuff. And the same thing with, demons. Why was The Exorcist so scary? Because a lot of people believed in that stuff. Now, not so much anymore, so it doesn't really scare them. That fear of hell and demons, it doesn't scare them anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I think my son has watched some very stuff I definitely wouldn't have watched at his age by that point. But he's quite used to it at this point. And I was saying to Jay on the previous episode, he walked in at the end of The Night Comes for Us, and the scene with the Stanley blade through the cheek thing that happens at the end. That was the thing that sort of made him go, no, like that. Didn't want to see it like that. Just the way that it's just the way he's just smiling there, grinning, and he's like basically daring him to go on, do it, sort of thing. And that, so it's amazing how that was more impactful. I find with him, his the bit that gets him is ghosts and things like that. It's stuff he can't rationalize and explain like that, and that's cool. So like, he's watched like Fede Alvarez's Evil Dead and Evil Dead Rise, things like that. Really gory stuff. But The Conjuring did more to him than those films. For instance. So
yeah, and I get that because like I love those movies. I think those movies kind of revived the genre a little bit from where it was at the time, like the first Conjuring movie. I think that really helped the genre going forward with more suspense rather than a reliance on jump scares, which unfortunately jump scares is all that really works nowadays. To really scare people. Like, it's really hard to make a horror movie, I feel, with just tension and building up that tension. It's very difficult these days. People have a very short attention span.
That's it. And there's a subset of the audience that are insistent that horror is just those things. It's gore and scares, and if it doesn't do either well for you, then it's not horror, or it doesn't work as a horror. When, as we've just discussed, horror is in many forms and can be in many ways. And that's where you sort of can end up kind of boxing yourself in as a horror fan. I think is not looking at the wider genre and the wider ways of what horror can be. So it's a fun genre. There's no doubt about that. I've pretty much made most of my living the last 10 years or so through horror in some way, shape, or form. Stumbled into it somehow. But
I love to see like directors' ideas of old concepts, if they can come up with something new that's also terrifying in some way, shape, or form. Especially since so much of it has been damaged by like Twilight and stuff like that, like vampires, werewolves, like they're not scary anymore because of movies like that. So seeing horror directors come in and try to revitalize these mythical creatures, I guess you can say at this point, or any creatures, and put an innovative spin on it, is always great to see. Even though the movie itself may not be great, the ideas behind it, I feel like, could be great.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the key things I think in horror is you have these moments in history where things begin to look silly or get ridiculed because of something. I think of like the way zombies were terrifying as they were until Michael Jackson's Thriller came out, and then they became a joke like that. And then you had to sort of rebuke it by having a harsher way of doing it, and but it evolved as a thing. Zombies sort of made their re-emergence back in the mid 2000s. So it happens for every sort of thing. I think we're just getting it a bit more with vampires again and werewolves, as you said. So
yeah, like the zombie thing is funny because people like Night of the Living Dead came out. Oh, that's terrifying, But then people are like, well, they're so why can't you just walk around them? And they're like, oh, let's change that. Let's do the Dawn of the Dead remake and give them the ability to run. And all of a sudden, they become the ultimate weapon.
Yeah,
And you're never gonna survive if a zombie's running because your ass is gonna get tired. It's not.
yeah, that's it. And that changed everything forever.
Yeah.
That whole double whammy of 28 Days Later and Dawn of the Dead was just everything. But yeah, we'll get on to the next subject first because otherwise,
Yes.
Well, for a while. So favorite actors.
Oof, favorite. Gosh.
That's why I say plural, because I know one is never easy enough.
Yeah. Interestingly, it's usually not a lot of actors that play in horror movies. Gary Oldman. I love Gary Oldman. He's one of my favorites. He's actually in, I think, the most of my favorite movies.
There you go.
Yeah, I love Gary Oldman. Tom Hanks obviously is phenomenal for me. I love Tom Hanks. I love Brad Pitt. I actually really love Tom Cruise's movies. I don't like him as a person, but I love Tom Cruise in movies. I think he's a great actor.
I'm with you on that. Yeah, it's like I think we had a similar discussion on the last episode about Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise, and how they've sort of grown into who they are as actors over the years, and it's been really delightful to see. Whatever you think of them as people, there is something about them that is traditional, and that's
it's like they can literally go into any role in any genre and kind of knock it out of the park.
Yes,
if they wanted to. Robert Downey Jr., Nicole Kidman. I'm a massive fan of Nicole Kidman. I have a very long range of actors. Idol-wise, the actors I idolized growing up, though, it's probably the same actors for a lot of people. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Bruce Willis, pretty much the action stars. I love watching all their movies. Especially with Arnold Schwarzenegger. He went from the Terminator, where he hardly had any lines, to something like True Lies and Commando and stuff like that. I just love that guy. And I love almost everything he's in.
Yeah. It's that recent documentary on Netflix was series was very good for that. I mean, it was basically his book, but seeing it the way it was and seeing him reacting and the extra bits, where he sort of owns up to his past misdemeanors and things like that. It's like,
people look at him and they're like, oh, he's this kind of actor, but he's got a huge range, man.
Yeah.
He's shown twins, hilarious. He's gone in almost every genre. Yeah, and he's done a pretty damn good job of it too.
Yeah, he really has. And I've seen him turn up in films for 5 minutes in recent years and be good.
Cameos.
So he's definitely underappreciated. I think he's shown over the years got a sharper mind than people ever gave him credit for at the beginning. He's he was a savvy businessman before he was ever an actor, for instance.
I don't remember if it was in that Netflix documentary where he talked about the Terminator and how he told James Cameron how the character should be, and James Cameron got pissed off and just told him, "Why don't you just play the character?"
Yeah.
That's how he got the job, because he didn't want to be the Terminator. He wanted lines. He wanted to be Kyle Reese.
That's it, yeah. And just to think how that could have gone, we could have had O.J. Simpson doing that instead.
How
crazy. On to the final question then. Favorite directors?
Luc Beeson is one of them.
I'm noticing patterns.
David Fincher. He's top notch. James Cameron, I don't think has ever put out a bad movie. I do enjoy Peter Jackson's work. Guillermo del Toro, I think, is one of the most innovative directors in the world to this day. People should really look at him and be like, we want him to make movies for us, especially horror movies, because his creature design ideas are out of this world.
He's just it's mesmerizing that he isn't a bigger deal, but then you sort of step back for it and then you go, well, he's won Oscars and he's done blockbuster style films and he's done everything, but it's like he still kind of feels like an outsider, which is quite an
He
achievement.
really does. He really does. I think he just doesn't like to play ball with studios. It's like, this is my ideas. I don't like it when they interfere with my ideas.
Yeah, I think he's been burned enough times or in more than one industry to sort of
Yeah.
get on.
Unfortunately, I was really looking forward to his Justice League Dark movie,
Yes,
and unfortunately that didn't happen.
that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
All right. So with that out of the way, let's get on to the film we're discussing, and one of those directors, of course, and some of those actors you mentioned are in this one. Luc Besson's vibrant sci-fi adventure, The Fifth Element. This features a stacked cast that includes, as we've said, Bruce Willis, Mila Jovovich, Gary Oldman, Chris Tucker, and Ian Holm. The Fifth Element sees Corbin Dallas, a New York taxi driver in the year 2257, caught up in the path of Earth's protector, an ancient warrior that is said to unite the elements to destroy a great evil. And Dallas meets a colourful cast of characters as he helped this super warrior, Lilu, to fulfill her destiny. So, Gary, when you go back to 1997, when this film came out, 2 years before George Lucas is going to go, do the prequel trilogy, and we just had like those special editions, I think, of the Star Wars films like that. There's a very distinct idea of what sci-fi films should look like and be like, and at that point, especially in the blockbuster range, I think the previous year we'd had Independence Day. That was a very distinct one in that. Men in Black wasn't out yet. I think that came out the year after this. But this from the outset is trying to be a very different beast, isn't it? Because I said vibrant at the top there, and it's very, very true about this. This is a film that Luc Besson himself said, he was sick of seeing these sci-fi films all being in dark places and dark, all that. He wanted everything to be daylight and all lit up and bright and colourful, and it really shows. I mean, down to every single thing from costume to set pieces and scenarios. It's a really dazzling movie. It's very much sticking to your eyes from minute one.
Yeah. Well, 100% agree with everything you just said. For me, it's Luc Besson's ideas of the movie and the way he wrote it. He wrote the characters, the costume design, everything he wrote, everything he did in this movie. This to me is literally what the Guardians of the Galaxy is. And
Yes.
this is like a prerequisite to that. This is literally what it is. And the casting choices he made were so perfect for every character, and like he did before with Leon the Professional, he kind of made stars with this. Mila Jovovich's career exploded after this movie, as did Natalie Portman's, even though Natalie Portman's, that was her first movie, The Professional, but careers exploded from this movie. Bruce Willis was kind of the only really established actor at the time.
Yeah, and even he just had a sort of like a revival recently after having like a little down period in the 90s. Pulp Fiction, I think, was after Pulp Fiction the year before. To go on to this afterwards was quite daring, I think. Considering the things that he'd had in the recent past that caused his star to drop a bit.
Yeah, and it reminds me a lot of the ideas a movie, I don't know if you ever see Idiocracy, kind of put into place, where we're in the future, everything we imagine should be better, but it's actually worse.
Yes.
Like the landfill is the same place as the airport. You're like, what the hell is that? The rich live insane lifestyles. They get to go on to some other paradise planet and enjoy themselves, while everybody else just suffers. And he does it such a good way of showing it too. Like when they show the outside of New York City, where it's all bright, everything looks happy, but then you go down, and that's where the filth is, and where the people that nobody wants to deal with are there.
Yeah.
So he does such a phenomenal job of kind of establishing a kind of status quo in a way in this movie. And like I said, with the acting, and the writing in general is so well done. But yeah, like you said, it's great to see a sci-fi movie at that time that kind of, I don't want to say made fun of itself, but made fun of a lot of the tropes that people have the idea of what sci-fi should be.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
It felt like a farce and a caper sort of film, a lot of the time, which is there are a lot of great French films that do that, especially in the 90s, and early 2000s, where they have a real sense of adventure, but tell it in a really twisted way, and still just feel quite strangely innocent whilst being, a bit horny and weird with it. So, and this is like the blockbuster example of all that, at that point. Yeah, and it's extravagant in so many ways. You don't like to do it, but it's one of those films you turn around and go, couldn't make this now, could you? Sort of thing. Not the same way.
Oh,
And we
not the
got,
same way. Like if they made this movie today, they would probably make it like a super serious movie,
yeah,
and that's not what it is. Like down to the monster designs and the makeup and the prosthetic, like the Borgs, is that what they're called? The
yeah,
Borgs. Like they just look like they have like a mask that they found at a Halloween store. Just put them on there.
yeah. It's everything is just very distinct, though. I think that's the best thing about it. The alien design here is, you can kind of call back to things you've seen before in a way, but they also feel very much like of this universe. I think you can see the influence this film had going forward in terms of other sci-fi properties, especially ones that didn't take themselves seriously. Futurama being like the biggest one, I think. Yeah, there is so much Futurama that kind of feeds back into this film. Yeah, especially in just like being scientific, having like all this retro future tech stuff, but also knowing how to not take it too seriously. That's it, and it really just get that really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like even his own future movie, what was it, Valerian and the Thousand Planets or whatever that movie was called?
Yeah,
Like he even took influence from The Fifth Element in that movie. Like it has
yeah,
a lot of the same beats as The Fifth Element does.
yeah. Which I suppose if you're going to go back to it, you probably would sort of evoke those sort of same things. Because so the Mangalores, I think, was the enemy, wasn't it? We were talking about. But
The Mangalores, yeah, sorry.
So you went wrong. There was a go back to the other characters that you were thinking of in terms of name. It's cool. We got there. So let's sort of get into it story wise. It opens very normally, doesn't it? Really, because
1914, I believe was the
1914.
year.
Yeah, very the Mummy vibes coming at me with this one. In terms of like, oh, okay, we're in Egypt and it's in the early 1900s, and I have put the right film on, haven't I? Sort of thing for a second, like there.
It's kind of like when you first started watching Stargate.
Yeah,
They kind of had the same idea.
which is mad. The coincidences around this time, are not just coincidences. I think there were some very odd things going on around the 90s in terms of like blockbusters and studios sort of looking across and sneaking a look at what the other studios doing and then doing something similar. There was the whole Deep Impact Armageddon thing, the whole Dante's Peak and Volcano thing. You're right. There's elements here that definitely turn up elsewhere, and it doesn't feel like a coincidence when you look at them. I think a couple of films that came out afterwards as well, including Men in Black, kind of fed off what this did, even if it didn't do as well critically as it did well enough to have an influence and have an impact on it. The fact we're talking about it now, 26 years later, suggests that it does have an impact on people still. We get this 1914 thing, this very setup heavy thing, of them doing an archaeological sort of survey on this pyramid, dusting all this area, and showing the comedy inherent in it, with the the boy who's basically falling asleep, having to hold up a mirror, reflective surface. The guy who's got light to do what he's doing. Weird Luke Perry cameo as well. In this moment, it's like when he was built so high, I was like, oh, okay, so he's in this film.
It's that Drew Barrymore in Scream.
Yeah,
thing,
it's like
right?
it's that TV guy. He's here, sort of thing, and yeah. I think they quickly established that there's something more than the discovery they're making here. And you get this whole wonderful farce straight away with the poison gag. We've seen it in films like The Princess Bride, where you get some funny take on the whole idea of trying to poison someone surreptitiously, and it just not going right. And it's a nice sort of cheeky little start to the way this goes, and quickly sort of descends into this thing of, like, now an alien ship's come down and now aliens are here and everything's really escalating really quickly, and it sets up that sense of chaos that the rest of the film really goes for in that, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Like, you see this giant ship come in, and then it's funny because like they show like the silhouettes, and Luke Perry's character's all terrified and all that, but then they show them and they look so comedic in a way. These mechanical, huge, rounded mechanical beings with this tiny little head that's a robot. It's almost funny in a way. You go from like this terrifying moment, for them at least, to for us, this comedic moment of seeing these actual aliens.
Yeah.
But yeah, they come in. They has a key that comes out of his finger that opens this door that nobody's been able to find for the archaeologists didn't know it was there. And they come in, grab the fifth element and the stones. This was one of the this moment right here. After I watched it again this week, for the podcast, I was like, well, why did he have to kill the archaeologist for this?
Yeah.
Like, that part, confused me because I never caught on to it up until now. It's like, well, why was the priest tasked with killing these people, finding this stuff?
Yeah, I think the idea is it was supposed to be exclusive knowledge. Like, no one outside of this group can know this, and anyone else is punishable with death. And so, makes sense, I suppose. And I think it also just sort of generates that drama and that uncertainty you get in those opening moments of like they're friendly but they're not friendly, sort of thing, and like that.
Because they did kill the archaeologists themselves.
Yeah. So yeah, we go from this thing with the warning that they'll come back to protect Earth when the time matters. From this great evil that's coming. We learn that this fifth element will sort of resurrect every 5,000 years, which conveniently is 300 years in the future from this point. And then we jump to 300 years into that future, and you start getting a taste of what life is like in that time. But before we go that, creature design was a thing we were sort of going on about, and as goofy as they can look in that moment, and like the funny thing I found with like that finger key thing was it reminded me of Red Dwarf and Crichton, like having like and that I couldn't escape that. But again, it's a film that it works.
Yeah, I absolutely would not be surprised if he got inspiration from Red Dwarf, Doctor Who, those kind of shows for a lot of the creature designs here.
Well, yeah, there's an episode of Doctor Who that basically copies that whole New York verticality thing, in terms of like traffic and having terrible things lower down and to be higher.
With David Tennant, I remember you, right?
Yeah. So that was the thing I thought of very quickly after sort of seeing those scenes again and going, oh yeah, it's that, isn't it? It's like that.
But it's that idea, right? Like, oh, in the future we're gonna have flying cars. Like, they nailed that into our heads for so long, and then he just took off with it. He's like, let's have flying cars. To this day, we still don't have flying cars.
Well, yeah, we got a couple of centuries to get there still. So, so those creatures, throughout the film, Really just fantastic. Yeah, like sure, they're the sort where you can see the joins, you can tell makeup or rubber prosthetics or whatever, and it doesn't matter. Yeah, it's like it still feels real and believable. You were talking about CG in horror and how that can sort of affect, how that impacts you. I think CG in general, when not applied properly, can sort of numb you to that sense of wonder. Where you look at something and go, okay, yeah, I kind of dig this because it's using real things and real costumes, real prosthetics, real animatronics and stuff, and it works brilliantly. And we get this sort of jump forward, as we said, and seeing all these creatures in the early going, and we get that little quick impact of what this great evil can do. It's basically just like a giant ball of fire, and it's like they do the very traditional stereotypical military thing of let's shoot it, see if we can kill it sort of thing, despite being warned that that won't work, it'll probably just make it stronger. Let's try anyway. They try anyway, and it doesn't go very well, unfortunately for them. It gets stronger and stronger, and you, as I said, you get this instant thing where you get a sense of what this great evil can do, as a thing. I wanted to ask you, like, early on here, like, considering how uniformly this great evil is portrayed as just being like a giant planet of death, how did that sort of fare for you in this story?
I always looked at it like, okay, it's essentially just evil, right? That's what it is. Like, how do you make evil manifested? And obviously you can do plenty of things. A lot of people take, Lucifer is that in Christianity. But there's if it's just pure evil, it's just, I don't want to say it's like an emotion or something, but it is what it is. So how do you take something that's supposed to be just pure evil and manifest it? As far as it just being a planet, I think it was designed for that because they wanted to show its power and its destruction. If you manifest it as a normal human or a human-like figure, like how can I possibly believe that this thing can wipe out civilization? So you created something, you manifested something that could do that. A giant meteor or whatever you want it to be will wipe everything out instantly. So that's how I took that for me. So obviously if I would have wanted it to be something else, because I wanted like go back then. I'm pretty sure it's okay for what it was, but seeing how many movies I've seen now, I would want it to be something else just so it would have more of a personality, I guess you can say. Because in this movie, what is it? It's just that. It talks a little bit later on, and then that's it.
That's it. Yeah, it's very.
It's not really a protagonist, or protagonist. Yeah.
Yeah, I liken it to the whole Moon in Majora's Mask thing. Where it's like it's a background thing, it's a MacGuffin for the story, blah blah blah. But it serves a purpose, and it's always a threat. Even when it's gone away, the idea is it's going to keep coming, and it's going to hit Earth or whatever. And your main sort of question throughout the film is like, well, how does this woman take on a planet-sized threat like that? So, what is the thing that will get her to? What is the power she's going to get that will, take this on?
It is one of those things like we never see what she looked like in her original form. We only saw the gauntlet that she had, so we don't know what she was like before. Obviously now she's got a more humanoid form, but was that how she always looked? Was it always a she? Does it even have a gender? We just don't know those things because they just didn't write those things. They didn't care about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a movie.
Who cares about that backstory stuff?
Yeah, well, but then I look at the rest of the movie and go, there's a multitude of sexuality going on here. It's everything is anything, and that's a great way to work this place. that's maybe the advancement that rings truest. Yeah, in the sense that you can be yourself in any which way you can. You only have to look at Ruby Road, for example, as an example of a character that has gained a better following in the years that have passed because it's someone being flamboyantly their self and out there, and kind of not defining themselves as a gender. Yeah, so it is a great thing like that.
Perfect being. She can be whatever she wants, right?
Yeah.
She's essentially God in this movie.
Exactly. And I like that when they get into it, and where Ian Holm sort of goes, "Oh, it's a she," sort of thing like that. He's not like disappointed, because they build it up early on that it'd be like him, it's him, like that. But he's kind of like giddy about the idea that it's not the established idea, and that was nice. I like that, and like I said, it really just fits the rest of the movie where you are in an era where you're interacting with species from other planets, and on the regular. What does it matter what anyone is as a human being or any humanoid shape at that point?
Yeah.
We get that. I think it's a good early time to sort of get into the costume design as well, where Jean-Paul Gaultier designs a lot of this, and you can tell, if anyone knows Jean-Paul Gaultier from in the 90s, in the UK and Europe in general, he was on a late night show called Eurotrash, where they basically looked at the very risque and exotic things happening in Europe. It was softcore porn basically on local television in the early hours of a Friday night or so, and it was just odd, like that. But he was on that. He was one of the hosts of that show with Antoine Decaux. And that's pretty much how most people in this country remember him, rather than the guy who's a fashion designer or has perfumes and aftershaves and stuff. And I love that kind of makes sense for me, that he is this very horny French designer, because I look at the costume design, especially for for Mila Jovovich, where it's like makes sense. As someone who is basically a model getting to wear the costume she does throughout this, it just feels very typical, I suppose is the best way to put it. But they're iconic costumes at this point now, aren't they? When you think about it, the two main ones she wears, like that.
Yeah, I see cosplayers at conventions to this day wearing her outfit from this movie.
Yeah, and undeniable. And I think, like, even Bruce Willis's subversion of his whole Bruce Willis wearing a vest thing, which he'd done in several movies beyond Die Hard, where it's his "I'll be back" at that point. To have it, when the first time he's turned away from you and you see the back of it, and it's very it's got very feminine sort of style to the back of it. And it's like, oh, okay, so they're kind of even changing that up, and the fact that he's got the blonde hair as well and things like that. It's nice. It feels distinctly Bruce Willis as a character, but it's still comfortable in this world, and I love that about it. They found a way to make him work as Bruce Willis in a film like this, because again, for everything that's happened to the guy in recent years, and where he's ended up just doing stuff because he has to, and he as a person is sort of degrading because of the problems he's had. It's that's been difficult to see. But then you see stuff like this, and you kind of get a reminiscence back to the Bruce Willis we used to have, where he was. People always seem to think he was serious, I think, because of Die Hard and things, not forgetting that he was in stuff like Moonlighting, and he really sort of established himself as a comedic actor in some ways when he wanted to be, and to play for laughs when needed. And, while he doesn't sort of outright do this, it's probably one of the best balances of Bruce Willis as, a comedic action star. And one of the main things why we say, it fits with that idea of what Guardians of the Galaxy does these days. He would be a perfect fit for that movie. That character would be perfect for now. He's almost like the template, for characters like that. And yeah, so it all goes down though to having that really great sort of costume design, and the hair and makeup, everything works for that character in designing that. And Gary Oldman, I think, gets the most interesting sort of deal in this film in that regard, because my daughter was just sat through the film just constantly questioning, is he a cyborg? Is he human? Is it plastic? Is it part of his head? Like that. When it came to the bit where his head's bleeding, he's going, well, he can't be a cyborg then, because look, he's bleeding there off his head like that. And at that point, I was like, I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know what the hell's going on at this point. But
that's the beauty of it, though, right? Is the costume designs, like you said, are so unique. It's stuff you would see in those weird like runway shows where they have the most outlandishly crazy shit wearing that nobody will ever wear in public. That's what these outfits are in this movie.
Yeah, it's like that with, like, I didn't want to say Star Wars, but I think it's more in line with like 60s, 70s TV sort of sci-fi, in terms of a lot of the way it's done. It's sort of good to go on to the next sort of section of this is when we sort of first see Bruce Willis in this film, which isn't long after what we've been talking about, and we get to see his Brooklyn apartment, and it is this sort of retro future griminess going on there. Instantly, again, the set design is another aspect of this. As we were saying earlier, lots of daylight scenes, lots of open scenes, and a familiarity that with what was is now, and a little bit of future stuff, kind of reminiscent of what Ridley Scott did with Alien, in terms of having that sort of, it feels futuristic, but it also feels out of date, at the same time. And I love that about it. That his apartment in that is like a wonder in that regard, and it again brings back those sort of Red Dwarf memories for me of just feeling like slightly naff, but also functional. And given the closer we get to a future, you just look at it and go, I could see something being as ordinary as this with those little differences, like the whole refrigerator freezer turns into a shower just by a press of a button sort of thing, like that. Even if that was just done for like the whole point of that gag that they do with it, it's still really cool functional stuff. And I love that because it means it doesn't date in the same way a lot of sci-fi can, where it's like, oh, this is the idea of the future in this year. It's set far enough ahead where I think even in that year, when we get to 2257, you could still look at it and go, oh, okay, yeah, that's kind of cute that they thought it would be exactly like this, but it still works because of it. It's a very distinct idea. I think sci-fi is always fun like that, when you just really dig into your idea of what you think the future will look like, and you understand that we don't always lose what we've had before to get there.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way of putting it. I also see it as, again, this like premonition that he had of what the future would look like, where he's got this New York high rise, essentially, is where Bruce Willis lives.
Yeah.
But you look at it, it's like one room, literally. That's all it is. It's just one room, right?
That just sort of changes and chops as we go. Yeah, it's nice.
Well, it shows us the shower, but where's the toilet? Like, where do you poop? Where's that at?
Can't come in drunk late at night with the wrong setting, that's for sure.
But this is like him seeing it. Okay, a New York high rise is like $5,000 a month or something, and it's literally just one room. And that's kind of where we're going now. You look at these high rise apartments in New York City right now. This is what you're getting for ridiculous prices. But yeah, the design of it almost kind of reminds me of Judge Dredd in a way.
Yeah, there's a lot of that to it.
Especially with how the police work in this, and the police costumes are the best. I love it so much because they have the stupid helmet, and the best thing is like they're all overweight cops. Like he's just like making fun of the cops because of that. I don't know. Like they're just these big people who can't fit through shit.
I mean, yeah, in a good sort of Red Dwarf moment actually when they do the chase later, like that. You have those two cops just basically saying, "Oh fuck it, we don't want to bother with this sort of thing." And one of them is Captain Hollister, who's actually like the main guy running Red Dwarf before everything goes to shit, and returns later in the later series. When they sort of resurrect the ship, and he also has that appearance in Aliens in the director's cut. When they had that sort of he's running Hadley's Hope as well. So it's that was a nice, cool sort of sci-fi legacy moment. There's a few like that, I think, in this film where you get actors doing what they do, and they've been in stuff before, and you're like, oh wow, yeah, it's even that's kind of respectful how they have this person in this role.
Well, one of my favorite scenes actually, and it's like the smallest, non-important scenes, like when he's eating the Thai food. The big window is open. He's got his little cat eating Thai food with him, and the guy just has his own essentially ship. It's a car, but it's designed like a ship, and he's just like a delivery driver, a food delivery guy, or a taco stand or whatever. And he just goes to people's windows and like, hey, let's eat. I thought that was so cool, and the design of that, the whole boat and how it looks old, like traditional old ship, but it's in the future. It's really cool how that's done.
I mean, yeah, again, that's kind of closer to what we're getting to because we've had this sort of rise in the idea of food coming to you beyond like the normal realms of it. So yeah, that feels like that would be like the natural evolution that not only does the food come to you, the restaurant comes to you, sort of thing like that, and you just have your whole thing come to your door. I love that scene. Yeah, it's great because you do just having that sudden realization that it looks like his apartment, but he's also eating. So what's going on like that? And then you sort of get that moment like that. So it's fantastic. And again, just great world building of just this idea of what New York is like at this point. I think they keep that going throughout all the time they're there. By seeing that, while the traffic goes up in layers, trains basically go sideways down and all this stuff. And I love the verticality of this New York, where they use all this, size they've built up over the years, and now, people can exist not only on every level in terms of the buildings, but in terms of like the foot traffic and the air traffic, or whatever is all going on.
If there is foot traffic.
Yeah, I mean,
there is
not for long, I'd imagine, but it's like.
The other one I want to mention really quick is the idea that everything looks the same.
Yeah.
Kind of how it is nowadays, at least here in the States. Like they build apartment buildings, they build condos, they all look exactly the same. Like there's no difference between the two. And I thought it was great how, in the beginning of the movie, he hears the doorbell, he opens the door, and it's the dude trying to rob him, and he's got the stupid hat of the hallway. It looks just like the hallway because everything looks the same. It's so easy to do it.
They do it later with the door gag where they take the name off the door, and because they're all so identical, they're like, well, this one's got the name on it, so it must be this one, sort of thing like that. It's you're right, because even here, like, there's this growing obsession, especially in like more well-off houses, where they'll basically redesign them to be just these grey and just grey things, like different shades of grey all throughout, like the front, the roof, the windows, whatever like that. And it's just so depressing in what they look like, because they all look like the same house. And then next to these houses that are like have a rich history. And it's unfortunate. It is unfortunate that you have that. But yeah. So yeah, I think, again, it's just one of those things that this film does really well, in terms of having a little prophetic sort of nature to it, without like being like nailed on, oh my god, this is spooky sort of thing. It's just little things where you can see someone being very observant of life and how it goes and where it goes, like that. Just, and culture in general, which, given everyone involved with this culture being like a big thing in it, makes sense,
And then they come back with that guy shaving with pliers. That was fucking incredible. I was like, wow.
So we get like this whole thing of like the birth of Lilu, which is fairly standard stuff, but it's kind of cool still, I think, in the way it's done. that whole just sort of being built up from that one charred hand as they got from it. And that whole escape, which is just, again, the whole sense of this film is just having a bit of farce nature to it, where everything is slightly comedic in how it's done, very Chaplin-esque, Buster Keaton sort of style, where everything is very physical comedy. And when Lulu basically just bonks that guy on the side of the cabinet she's in, like that, it's so light in the way it's done, but it's the way he just drops. It's funny. I really enjoyed that, and that whole escape is brilliant. I think, again, one of the sort of more iconic scenes from this film, the whole her jumping from that ledge like that, and before that was a very sort of modern Marvel style scene, actually, when you think about it, in terms of where the cops are asking her to stop and do that, and then she just ignores them, and then the cop has like the one-liner about it and like that. But then we get the whole, we've been getting to this point, with Bruce Willis and Miller, and they're going to meet, and they're going to have this moment, and we get that whole sort of chase for New York, which, as I said, is made more interesting by the way they've designed it, with trains going a certain angle and cars going a certain angle, and you go beneath like the mist area into the bottom areas where it's all dodgy and horrible, and cops won't follow you there for long, sort of thing, is the idea.
Yeah. He mentions if they don't follow you after a mile, they don't follow you.
Yeah. And then he says maybe 2 miles when they carry on.
They just, again, shows you the laziness of the cops in this future, where it's like they don't care.
Yeah, which again sort of sells the mysteriousness of what their situation was. Like, oh, okay, well, they're still following, sort of thing. And yeah, it's a really cool chase, at that point, and we get this sort of first sort of banter, I suppose, between Corbin and Lulu, where he doesn't understand what she's saying, but he's sort of grows to respect her in his own way, I suppose, when she sort of learns English off the back of the poster in the back of his car, and he defies the cops in what he does and like that, and it's very shorthand the way they do it, and you have no reason to believe why he would do it. I think it matters. I think because the basic explanation when you get through the whole film is like he just decided that he was horny for this one and he loves this one, and that's it. Like that. It's a romantic comedy in that sense. He wants to be with her. She speaks a different language. She's been asleep for 5,000 years, and like she knows nothing. And it's about them meeting in the middle, in terms of their humanity, and that, in retrospect, that works. But at the time, you're looking at it and going, why would he help her? Given everything that's going on and the impact it'll have on him, we can't quite understand. But it does very much come down to the idea that man is horny, he will do anything, sort of thing. That's it.
For me, I see it a little different. I see it as, and you see it when she's first, when she first emerges after they reconstruct her, from the general and the doctor guy who runs the program, is they're just in awe of her because she is the perfect being. And I think that's, and they show that throughout the whole movie. Like every time she encounters somebody new, they're in awe of her, right? And I think that's what really that's what drove him, is like I don't want to say it's like a spiritual mystical thing, but that's kind of what it's kind of given off, is like essentially it's how you would imagine seeing God, right? You'd be in awe if God appeared to you, is like, holy shit, and I think he sees that too, and he just wants to be part of her light and her goodness, because when they do the opposite, when they show the evil, when the evil communicates with anybody, they're trying to avoid it at all times. Like Gary Oldman, he doesn't want to talk to it in the movie. He's terrified. The general was there. Everybody who came in contact with it wanted to avoid it. So I think that's how they did it with her, is like everybody wants to be around her because she's given off good energy.
I suppose it comes down to Corbin Dallas being quite you know, I don't want to say simple and like stupid, but you know, he is a very basic person, you know, and he can't quite grasp what he's feeling. And so
Yeah.
maybe he translates it as that, you know, that it's love and lust, and that's it.
He talks on the phone with his boss. If you remember, he talks
Yeah.
describing her, and yeah,
That's it. That's it. So yeah, maybe it's just that. It's a thing that, you know, is very common in humanity. You have this. If you don't have the vocabulary or the understanding to explain why you love something or why you're into something, it does just sound like, you know, very basic, like you're infatuated sort of thing. Yeah, and that's it. So yeah, in a way, that's probably quite smart writing, really. You know, to have a character like that where their love and, you know, horniness, if you will, is just their way of reacting to what's going on. When you think of the more educated people, I suppose, in this film, they're the ones that sort of revere her in a different way. You know, like Ian Holm again is a great example there, and yeah, he definitely worships her in a very different way. You know, he's in awe of her in that very religious manner.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a very good point, Gary. Very good point indeed. So then we get to see Gary Oldman for the first time, really, and his southern accent and his extravagant costume. I mean, man, he had the things people have had to pull off over the years in terms of like sci-fi, especially. I think people always bring up Eddie Redmayne in Jupiter Ascending. That's it.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, where people bring up how, you know, he just feels ill at will in who he is and what he is in that film. Like that, you know, the film where Channing Tatum is basically a human dog squirrel thing.
yeah. His design, his costume is so iconic. I feel like I've seen
Yes.
it from villains in like every sci-fi medium I've experienced. Like that design, it has been used in so many things. I feel,
yes,
like it's the perfect bad guy design.
it's a perfect rakish villain design, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's all just, again, this is what comes from having a fashion designer and doing your costumes like that. I think everything about the early shots of him is not showing his face; it's the back of him and the costume showing like the contours that go up. Yeah, the costume going up into his head and like the way it looks instantly makes it interesting and like you want to know more like that. And in any other film, when he turns around, it wouldn't have worked, you know, because you would have gone, that's Gary Oldman looking like a daft twat, you know. And here, it's like, for everything you've learned at this point from this film, he's just a character. You know, he ceases to be Gary Oldman. It's one of those roles where he just kind of loses himself into the character, and you know, he's not even like the thing you talk about in this film at all, really. You know, he's a highlight, sure, because he's Gary Oldman, but at the same time, he does that thing that he does a lot in his later career, where he just blends into a film. It's like, you know, he's easygoing. You know, he works for this film in every distinct way he should. Yeah, I mean, yeah, even the way they treat him in this film isn't like he's the big bad, because, you know, we have established the big bad is this fucking big planet of fire.
But the great thing is like he's technically the physical manifestation of the protagonist, right?
Yeah.
In this movie. And the best thing about it, he never crosses paths with the hero of the story, Bruce Willis. Like they never have a single scene together.
That was the fun thing to sort of come back to on this one. When you do get to that scene later on, you just suddenly realize, like, they never met. That was it. They just like just, and it's all very anticlimactic. And it's just one of those things that works for this film because, you know, they're telling it in a certain way where you're just like, it's playing with the idea of what you would expect with these things, and he is basically what he's a salacious crumb to the big bad Jabba the Hutt. You know, he is just there nattering away while everything's going on.
But they're indirectly connected because Bruce Willis works for him.
Yeah,
because he gets fired by him.
Yeah, it's mad the way it all works out, and I love that. And there's a lot of that in this film where you just have a lot of these sort of connections and the farcical nature of making those connections like a comedic moment. Yeah. So one of those actually involves Oldman is the choking scene. Yeah, where Ian Holmes there, like that he's gone on all about this power he's got and this technology he's got like that, and then he chokes, on his food effectively, and then no one can help him. There's no machine that will help him stop choking like that. And Ian Holmes very quickly to sort of point this out and go, yeah, you can't, for everything you've got, you can't do that. And then he saves his life, blah blah blah, like that. Just, but like that bit where he just gets that fucking creature up to just like begging the creature to just pat him on the back, and it's just like this little pink elephant thing. Yeah, and he's just like the creature's looking like, what the fuck am I gonna do, sort of thing like that. It just, I love it. It did sort of really send home the idea. It's like you think you're so powerful, but you are a pawn. Like things will just not work out for you if those who don't want them to are like that. And that's a good early warning sign for what the film does. But if we're talking fast, I think like the scene that really sells it for me, something that feels almost Clouseau-esque, in the way it goes, is that whole sort of fast with the Floston tickets, where everyone's trying to, first it's, the military trying to give the tickets to Corbin like that to make him go. The ruse of the fact that actually, well, we're giving you these tickets because you're going on a mission for us, and like just doing this whole constant round about who's getting the tickets, who is pretending to be Corbin Dallas, who is Corbin Dallas, sort of thing. And just like you said, that whole thing about the airport being garbage.
No
sheet.
security, people just walking around with guns and shit.
Like that. And then like the only time security ever really goes up is when someone rude to the person at the desk, and that's it, like that.
Yeah.
Which is the ideal way it should be, if we're honest. But yeah, the constant back and forth of that, where everyone's just claiming to be the person, and then different ways people are getting onto the plane. It's beautiful. It does just make the whole thing feel light in a way that I really enjoy with this film, where it has that sort of caper vibe where we got to go and do this big heist where we get this thing and whatever, and with unconventional teammates and whatever, and different teams are going into it. And that scene just is perfect at showing that, where you get repeated scenes of the same idea, going up to the desk saying my tickets, blah blah blah, and the different results you get from it. And it's just a fantastic scene. One of my favorite scenes in the whole film, I think, just because you do get that whole thing of like the airport being a garbage heap at the same time as being an airport. And the very like half-hearted like apology for the mess sort of thing. It's like the fact that he just sort of says what like that, like he hasn't noticed the fucking shit pile of garbage just everywhere.
Yeah, it's like this super dangerous, but like the ships fly on like what we believe is like nuclear power or something. When they change the cells, like so it can just blow up the whole planet if it wanted to.
Yeah, that whole thing was just. I love it.
It's such a dangerous way. It looks so fun to live in, but it's such a dangerous world to actually live in. This world, I feel.
Yeah, I mean that's it, and I think that's the idea, isn't it? It's just everything's done without any care or meaning, and again, that's one of those things that kind of fits the way work has gone for many people, where they're just thrust into the even more dangerous situations, and it's the only way to live, sort of thing. It's nuts that anyone would ever be put in a situation clearly underqualified for it to just be lugging around fucking nuclear
Yeah,
stuff.
just slamming it on the ground and shit.
Yeah, and that it's crazy. It's crazy, but again, it shows the distinct style of this film, where everything is understood that this will be the way it is, and you will sort of get this idea constantly that people aren't cared about at all. They are just doing whatever is given to them.
I think a lot of credit for a lot of the scenes in the movie as well have to go to Ian Holm. Obviously, he does such a phenomenal job in every scene that he's in. Whether he's scared or he's frustrated, he does it so well. But also his disciple, the kid who's always afraid of everything. I think he nails that role so well. Like when he turns around to look at the trash and then he sees Corbin Dallas walking up, he just gets terrified and freezes up.
And you just like, I thought he was going to kill me. It's like when you get back to that,
he just comes and takes his
barely
drink.
says anything that suggests that. Like...
Even if it plays on the idea that like the bartender is always there to listen to you, but in this case it's a robot and it doesn't give a shit what you're saying because it has no emotions.
Yeah, that's a fantastic. So yeah, all round, that's just a fantastic scene. And then I think we get to the point that is probably the most divisive for many people with this film, is Chris Tucker as Ruby Road. Yeah, I think we're coming on board. But as a character, I think it's one of the most interesting ones in terms of how timely it's ended up becoming. This is a character that is essentially akin to the modern day influencer in so many ways, like TikTok, Instagram sort of style people who are just living their lives online, in this case just on like radio effectively here, like told through a stick. Again, that sort of retro future idea, still getting the point of where we were actually going in the future. And that to me made the character far more interesting on this rewatch, because like I said, I haven't watched it for years, so, and all this has happened in that time, in terms of like YouTubers, influencers, streamers, whatever. And it is the perfect sort of representation of that from a time before it was ever even close to a thing. I really found that a fascinating character to come back to. How did you sort of feel with that, coming back to sort of Ruby Road?
I've always loved this character. I think at the time, I don't think there's any actor who could have done the role that he did.
No, I mean, it is really impressive, really, when you go look at it. It's just like,
I think it was designed for him, like to wear the outfits that he wore and be okay wearing those outfits. At the time for him, was amazing. The hairstyle he had was crazy. It's like completely different on the next scene. But the hairstyle and the fact that Chris Tucker is so good at talking so fast, we're like, what the hell did he just say? And he does it in this movie a lot. Like there's a lot of scenes where he's talking so fast, you're like, what the hell is he saying? I don't think there's anybody at the time who could have done it. I think the costume designer probably, like Chris Tucker probably told him, was like, do whatever the hell you want with me.
Yeah.
Luc Beeson was like, let's do it. Let's run away with this character. It's like he wrote that character specifically for Chris Tucker. Because I don't see anybody else who could have played that role.
So again, it's one of those that feels like a character that has naturally evolved into characters that we see now. Diluted, for sure, but it's another benchmark sort of character in this film where you're like, I can see a lot of like comic relief characters that have come in recent years that have a lot of what that character has. I mean, the way you look at it back then is like, it's kind of like Prince, on Prince on speed, if you will. It's just constant, jittery, over the top, and the scene.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Prince was a huge inspiration to that character too.
Yeah, there's so much about it. I mean, the high pitched voice, but I think just having that sort of accelerated. Again, I want to make that Red Dwarf comparison and say it kind of also reminds me of the Cat, and that Danny John Jules' character. So it's that mixed with Prince, and that character had a bit of Prince to it. It is like a character that has this, very vain, egotistical self, but is also, and is very much in touch with their femininity in a way, but is also like the ultimate Lothario, if you will. At the same time, shown very, very strongly in that scene as the plane is taking off and we're getting those different, we're getting those interspliced sort of things going on at the same time, and it's interspliced with that whole oral sex scene he has. It's like
with his hair, with the hair.
I forgot it was there, and my daughter was watching the film, and thank God she's too young to know what the fuck was going on, because Christ Almighty, that would have been a conversation to have. So that she didn't ask, and I was dreading it, because she's gonna ask a question about what the fuck's going on here. I think Chris Tucker's fast talking kind of navigates away from it. It's like
it does help, doesn't it?
Yeah, that and just like jumping to something else happening every few seconds. It's like, oh my God. But yeah, separately from that, that scene is just like, again, brilliant use of sex and comedy, and just the scenes that sort of cut between this, the way it ends up being, it's majestic. Again, it's, for everything we say about this film being silly, it is genuinely beautiful in how it's shot and how the scenes are interspersed. And this, again, is just one of those great examples of just like connecting different characters to a scene, and
it's also, for me, I took his character also. It's funny when like he's walking down the hall and the girls line up for his autograph, and he just takes like a paintbrush and just like walks across. Yeah. Like they're like all Asian girls too, and like it's almost as if like his personality was designed as like some famous J-pop or K-pop star.
Yeah, again, it's really relevant in that regard, isn't it?
Especially with the outfit that he had. I thought that was funny. I was like, why are they all Asian? Like, what is he trying to tell me? And again, it's something that didn't connect with me back then. But now, when I know of K-pop and J-pop and how insane their fans are, it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely does. Kind of fast forwarding closer towards this sort of end period here, we get on board everything. We get to this resort planet, if you will, which is a bizarre thing in itself, because it's like promising like the Hawaii style experience, but it's not fucking Hawaii. It's a fucking planet that's an ocean. That's it, and you just have to do it on a boat.
Yeah, and the best thing about that planet too is like I assumed it's going to be on the planet, but no, they're just flying in space.
Yeah,
like why? I thought I was supposed to be at a resort.
And again, I love that. It's just like, again, that's really sharp, by modern standards, where you just look at it and go, yeah, the idea that you are being promised the feeling of something, but it's nothing alike, like that. And how many tech startup nonsense things have we seen in the past where it's like, oh yeah, we're promising you something that's really in charge of, keeping in touch with what you used to like, and then it's like, yeah, but you've done it shit and to make you money, sort of thing, like that. And it works on people. So yeah, that in itself was like, again, a really subtle bit of the film where you were just looking and going, oh yeah, I get you, I get where you're going. But the big thing here is, of course, the diva and that whole thing, and setting up another one of the big scenes in this movie, which is like her singing. She's supposed to be carrying the stones that they come for. That's why everyone's coming here to do this. And again, you're having this constant thing between the different characters who come here to get these stones, and how that plays out. Now, this is great for several reasons, because not only do you have like the singing bit, which, given everything else going on, you wouldn't think would be like a highlight, but it is, because it was designed in a way that the person who was singing it, an actual opera singer, could not sing the song as it was, because it was impossible for a human to sing like that. So I think there were parts of the song where they had to cut things up to make it work, and do it in little chunks like that. And I believe you can sort of hear that in certain sections of the song. But it's really cool, and again, interspersed with action that's going on elsewhere, as like stuff is escalating, the song is escalating, and you have the Lilu, showing off her action chops, during this bit, and again in that really brilliant way where it's like the choreograph of the scene is just choreography. That's the word, but it was just amazingly simple and like almost cartoonish, but in a way that just worked again for this film.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you get all that. That's all happened. Then chaos happens with the whole, the Mangalores coming on and shooting everything up. And then you get Bruce Willis getting to do Bruce Willis things, really for the first time in this film. And it is just like, proper, like it's almost a parody of what Bruce Willis is in the way he goes about things, which again, I think is a very deliberate choice. But it does just make him look like a badass in this environment, because he is just like really casually just killing things and like left, right, and center, and like right down to that whole hostage situation in the end, where it's like, all the tension's going to be there, and it's like, nope, fuck it, bang, bullet between the eyes, sort of thing. It is just, and again, another great use of Ian Holm in that scene. Yeah, that for me is just probably the last sort of big sort of spectacle in the film, because everything else after this is very much just sort of wrapping things up in terms of where they're going to go with the message of the film. But yeah, how did you find that whole sort of opera section, I suppose, is the best way to put it?
I absolutely loved it. I think it was a little divisive for a lot of people, because it started off as, this wonderfully beautiful sung opera song, right? And then it goes into like this opera poppy type version of it afterwards. But either way, I thought it fit perfectly with what was happening in the scenes.
Yeah.
One of my favorite parts about this whole part of this movie is Chris Tucker being essentially the narrator of the entire scene to the whole world. And he's not narrating it like, Planet Earth or anything like that, like a real. He's narrating it like a TikToker would narrate.
Yeah, he's reacting. It's a reaction video to.
Exactly, and I absolutely loved it. He's like, I'm gonna go and see what's going on. He's like just crawling around. I loved it. I absolutely loved it, because everybody else is just sitting there like, what the hell is Corbin? Like, he's making Corbin out to be like some mass murderer, Even the president, played by, the late Tommy Lester, he's like, I wonder where he's getting these skills from. It was great. Like you said, it allowed Bruce Willis to be that action star that we were growing up with, from Die Hard and onwards. And like, it's literally the only time he did it in the whole movie. We knew he was, ex-military, a badass, so he can do a lot of cool stuff, but we finally saw it here. I loved how they had like that old school fucking Gatling gun, like the pixie glass and the rocket on it. I was like, what kind of shit is that? What kind of future weapon design is this? But it played to a lot of some of the other characters that they showed off when they're going to the opera from rich families and stuff. You had that deaf guy who can't hear anything. You have a whole bunch of different characters, and obviously he asks him for the gun. He throws him freaking pool balls instead. He's like, what the fuck?
It's just like, little moments like that. It is just, again, fantastic. I think the middle of this movie is just full of the best stuff, undoubtedly. I mean, we haven't even talked about the thing that is pretty iconic now at this point, is the constant talk of multipass. Especially Lilu's thing of multipass, thing like that, and describing herself as Mrs. Dallas Multipass, things like that.
It's something I wanted to bring up with her. Throughout the whole movie, like, I think Mila Jovovich, I feel like, is such an underappreciated actress when it comes to emotions. At least she's a very emotional actress.
Yeah, I think given the right material, she's fantastic.
Yeah, like, she's the supreme being, right? Like the almighty being, but yet she's so ignorant to the world. It's almost like that whole idea of, like, I hate to bring it up, like Dragon Ball and Goku. Like, he's super powerful and all that, but he's so ignorant to how the world works. Like, you can't fault him for it, because he doesn't know. He never grew up with an education. Same with her. And obviously we see her watching the screen. She's, doing crazy fast language reading, whatever it is she's doing, to catch up on how the world obviously plays a major role going into the end of the movie. But like, her ignorance and how she portrayed it so well, like when she has that little makeup box and she's like, what the hell is it? And then she uses it and she still didn't know what the hell it did. You know, she does such a phenomenal job throughout the whole movie with her performance. But like we expected everybody else to kind of do what they do. Like I love that Bruce Willis is like shoots first, ask questions later, essentially.
That's the thing with me, Liam. I think my very troubled history with the Resident Evil movies definitely comes down to a misunderstanding of what makes her good in this. Yeah, which is like making her like the god of those films, but not in a way that works. You know, like that. There's no naivety. There's no humbleness. It's always at the expense of other characters, like that. And you know that's generally where that series goes wrong. You know, beyond shit writing and most of it. But
yeah,
here it's like the balance is right. You know, it's like she's not perfect. You know, they keep pointing out the fact she's vulnerable despite being powerful, and we've seen that done in many films, even since like that. But here, it feels honest and genuine. You know, she's herself. She helped develop this language that they do in the film. With Luc Besson, because she already knew like several languages herself. And the fact they actually wrote letters and had conversations in that language whilst filming this film, that's how into it she was. And I think that's a really underappreciated part of this film, is she given a role like this where she understands everything about it and has someone confident in what she can do. She's fantastic, and someone getting the best out of her, without a doubt. And whenever you see the best out of Mila, it's always when someone gets what she can do as an actress, rather than just trying to make her look cool. Which is, I think, the Resident Evil series is guilty of that constantly.
Yeah, and I feel it's a shame because those movies took up so much of her career.
Yeah.
Obviously, she did it with her husband, who Paul W.S. Anderson, the director. But I think she could have achieved so much in her career if not that obligation she felt like she had to have for her husband to do those movies.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate because she is, I think, a very good actress.
Yeah. I think considering, from her background as well, and to come into that, it's really admirable. At that point in her career, you would think she would go on to do more and better, like that. She got to star in a franchise where she made billions of dollars, but at the end of the day, it probably took away from her career beyond that, because of it.
And yet somehow those are still the best Resident Evil movies.
I'd like to, that's a whole other debate.
yeah, we won't get into that. But yes, the action scenes, I love how Bruce Willis we got to find the leader. They won't fight without the leader. He just goes up and shoots him, and they just give up. Come on.
They just start carrying like half a second after. It's like, it was great.
But again, this is also one of those moments where Chris Tucker, I think, kind of steals the show a lot.
Yeah,
he has such a big personality in this movie where every scene he's in, he kind of just steals it, right?
Yeah.
So like when Bruce Willis finds her and she's in the ducks because Zora came in and shot the whole place up.
Yeah.
Chris Tucker comes in, he's like all exhausted, he's got pain in his abdomen because he never runs in his life. And he sees the timer with the bomb and the priest. He's like, well, what is this thing with these numbers? He knows what it is, but the bomb detector's not going off, so it can't be that.
Yeah, I like that. And then just again, there's loads of examples of that in the film where like, oh well, this can't be this because this thing hasn't happened, and then in very cartoon fashion, that thing will happen, like the alarm going off. It's just straight after he says it. It's such a simple gag.
Yeah, and it's like this is supposed to be this emotional moment. Like she could be dying, Bruce Willis trying to save her, and then here comes Chris Tucker with this fucking crazy ass comedy line. It's like the whole Marvel way of making movies, right? At this point.
I mean, ironically, it's like many people like to take the piss out of Marvel by saying that it's like a certain thing, and they do that sort of heightened version of it. But this is it. This is that. Right? Marvel's quite subdued by comparison.
I can easily see the same scene playing out in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, you could.
Star-Lord comes in, he saves Gamora. Here comes Drax. He's like, "What the fuck is this thing with all these numbers?"
Yeah, that's it. I think what this does different to that, I suppose, is that it doesn't hide the cartoon elements of what it's doing, you know, in terms of like the setup and the way you think of all those moments. They all very much go back to that sort of Looney Tunes sort of aesthetic, yeah, of like obvious what's going to happen, but you like to see how the setup will work for the joke like that. And it's always beautiful because it's framed perfectly, it's acted in just the right way, like that. And again, Chris Tucker plays a great role in that because he acts the idiot, and Ian Holm then just sort of acts the second idiot, and it's just, as you said, juxtaposed to what's going on, with the other characters. It's like, oh yeah, no, it's magical.
Because then it just cuts to the scene. It shows Zorg, right?
Yeah.
Leaving. And then it comes back to them, and it's like the camera shot, like they're all staring at the camera, the three of them. And Bruce Willis has the dumbest look on his face. And he's like, it's so good.
Brilliant. I mean, going to that, I mean, the next big thing that happens is, of course, Zorg coming back, deactivating the bomb, only for Mangalore to set another bomb off just as he does it. And it's just, I mean, again, going back to what we were saying about that character, just it's a really low key way to go out like that. Not getting the big like hysterical villain's death. He just gets shafted by the people he's worked with, and that's it. And yeah, it is great. Again, just that comedic timing is perfect. And again, goes back to the idea that it is like a living cartoon, in terms of the way things are happening.
I think one thing we should mention is the awesome weapon that he created.
Oh, yeah.
It's a gun that has homing bullets, and he just like goes around behind them. Iconic now in a lot of video games.
Yeah, well. I mean, yeah, it's like that multi weapon thing like that. It just like it does this.
It's
it
a
does
harpoon
this. It does
gun.
that.
It shoots needles. It's a flamethrower. It shoots a net for no goddamn reason. It has a cryo thing on it. How does this thing function now? Where's the ammunition clip go? And I think that goes for his bomb too, because his bomb is so unique that he has to deactivate it with a card. Yeah. Like there's no wires or anything. He has to put like some weird ass card in there that only he has. So that thing's gonna blow unless he deactivates it himself.
That's it.
Kind of a genius design.
We get to the finale, I suppose, now, which is the whole saving the Earth, because now the big evil is coming closer to the Earth as they're trying to go back with all the stones they found. And on the journey, Lilu basically gets to see more of what humanity has done and sees how war escalates and the terrible things humanity does to each other, and it leaves her disillusioned with whether she should be trying to save them at all, like that, which is understandable. That's the way it would go in a lot of ways. Now, the great story then is like, how do you resolve that as a thing? For someone who is very naive in some ways, but also very steadfast in their beliefs, how will you change the way they feel on something as strong as that, having witnessed everything humanity has done? And I think we go back to what we were talking about earlier. Love, is what they end up doing as a thing, and like, Bruce, Corbin Dallas is there saying, like that. Yeah, that's a great thing. Yeah, that's a great example of what humanity can do. There's great things on that we do as a people, that go beyond the terrible things that a few do, like that. And it's very shorthand, very saccharine, but again, it works in terms of the honesty that character has shown, and especially with Lilu as well, where everything feels quite pure about her, and in a way with a bit of danger and a bit of something there that just goes beyond what you or me would think. And as a result, as corny as it can be in those final scenes, and the obvious sort of outcome is like, love saves the day, sort of thing like that. It's nice. It kind of works. And the fact that they've orchestrated the story to this point to get a person basically for every stone, and then the figuring out of how the stones work and stuff like that, and having everything. It calls upon like a fate that these people all were joined together to make this happen. And given the way fastest work, in terms of structure and like you have to like put all these pieces together to make all of it work and make the fast a farce and really just be entertaining as something to watch play out like that. It's cool how that then plays into like the destiny of all the characters involved in it. On the side of Lily, basically coming together to be part of, saving the Earth as they do, like that, and to have characters as distinct as they are, when you think about it, never would have been interacting in normal life, but the way they're introduced is very much happenstance and done in a way that's impressive in that regard. It's quite the ending in that regard. I think it's in a really sappy way, I suppose. It's like it shows like from all walks of life we can come together and do the right thing if we really put our minds to it, sort of thing.
Yeah, I actually feel like this is one of the best endings to a movie, because of the way it's done overall.
Yeah.
The music that plays in it when he's talking to her and trying to convince her about love is one of the best songs in that whole movie. It's a very emotional, sad song, but it's her state. Like I feel like there's so much negativity that she's noticing, and all the bad that's happening around her. It's started to affect her. That's why I feel like she was so weakened at the end of the movie. Yeah, she got shot, but it was like an arm wound. But I feel like all the bad and all the evil around her was taking a toll on her. And she had to find something, and this is a supreme being that was used essentially as a weapon. That's her entire life. And now, because she's met Corbin and these super colorful characters, she's gotten this personality, and she's starting to feel things and trying to understand things. You can't tell me that, this is a supreme being that's been fighting evil this whole time, but she didn't know what humanity did to each other before 1914. When the movie starts, like wars have been happening for a long time, since dawn of time. It could have been that ignorance. Like they could have just kept that from her. And again, we don't know what exactly she was before she was reconstructed. But it's like that idea that a machine eventually starts to think and have a personality of its own. Like iRobot did a very good thing with it. It feels the same. Obviously, she's not a robot, but it's the same concept.
I like it. Films like Starman, where it's an alien learning humanity by having some sort of connection with humanity they wouldn't have previously had, like that. And that's the big thing, isn't it? It's like that. Maybe that was the missing factor, but they didn't have the empathy. That was there.
We can't sit here and say to ourselves that we don't look at the world now and be like, is this fucking planet worth saving? I feel that way a lot of the times too. Like I see a lot of the terrible things going on. Like, God, it's even worth saving anymore? Just let it fucking die. It's the empathy. I empathize with her a lot. Like, why should I save the world when all you do is destroy it? That's essentially what she said. But the Four Stones thing I thought was another great moment where they have to figure out how it works. None of them have ever seen it work, including the priest. He has no idea. Nobody gave him an instruction manual. And to discover it essentially by accident. The kid. He's like, we're all gonna fucking die, and he just sighs, and it works.
I love that, because that just again feeds into this whole happenstance of everything that's gone on before. People just end up stumbling into these situations, and again feels like destiny. It was supposed to happen.
Yeah, and the foreshadowing too with the match throughout the entire movie. Bruce Willis is trying to find a way to smoke a cigarette. So it's just the foreshadowing. There's the fire, and again, Chris Tucker again stole the moment here, in my opinion. Was like, I got no fire. Father, do you smoke? Like, how do you where do you get the fire? And he has the last match,
Yeah.
last chance to save the world. And yeah, but the conversation he has with her is such a good conversation. And he
Yes.
finally, love is what so many consider to be the most powerful thing in the world, right?
Yeah.
um and they obviously emphasized it here, and she feels love for the first time. She's never felt it, and it's such a powerful emotion. It activates her power,
Yeah.
um destroying the evil that's coming. And again, the evil is just that. It's just a means to an end, like we talked about.
Yeah.
Not really the main protagonist here. um it's just
Yeah.
like,
But
yeah.
I think that maybe that's probably the most interesting thing, though, isn't it? That it's not the main thing, but it's there, constantly creeping towards us. Because that
Hmm.
pretty much does that not just show everything, that is life these days, where you have to kind of profess, your empathy and your love and passion to things to fight this creeping evil that's taking little bits of it away from you constantly, whether it be like the joy of writing, the joy of making songs or acting, or whatever. All these things are being eaten away by people who don't care, and want to, basically make it uniform and theirs. You lose the humanity in it. And that's kind of like the evil in many ways. The planet in many different ways getting sort of dwindled to a bland paste, and the only thing to fight back is people caring and showing that care, in the ways that they see fit. So it's, given the way the rest of the movie is, in terms of how characters are, in terms of their sexuality and gender, it's a really kind of have a powerful side to it in that regard. I mean,
Hmm. I feel it was very ahead of its time.
yeah, it is, and I think unfortunately, there are aspects that, outside of the film that then don't quite gel with that, because Luc Besson is a great as he is as a filmmaker, has had questionable stuff about him beyond that.
Yeah.
But you can be a questionable human being in many ways and still produce beautiful things, and still have views that do, lean on the right side of history. It's just, because again, that's humanity in a nutshell. Like, we can do terrible things, but we can do wonderful things too. And it's just about how you balance the books in that regard. And yeah, so it's almost too personal in that regard, as a film. But
Yeah.
yeah,
There's a lot of cool theories that have been going around since the movie came out. Like, a lot of people are saying, like, the planets in our solar system are just the evil that's been destroyed in the past,
yeah,
which I thought was a pretty cool theory.
yeah, I did like
It
that.
makes sense because it does look like a planet, right? Or at least
Yeah,
the moon.
I mean, it becomes like a moon, doesn't it, at the end when she destroys it, but doesn't destroy it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. And why does it take? What did it say? 3,000 years for
yeah,
it to?
5,000, I think, isn't it? So
5,000. Like, the theory is that's how long it takes civilization or humanity's evil to build up so it can manifest itself as a physical manifestation.
well, that's good
Um,
then. We'll be dead by then, so it's fine. So,
yeah, but I just thought it was a cool theory. Like, it takes
yeah,
time for that to build, and once it's there, then it tries to destroy everything. Um, so it's just the cycle that keeps on repeating, unfortunately. But the end is unique because, as far as we knew from what we saw in the beginning, once the evil is destroyed, we assume that the supreme being turns into stone or
yeah,
something happens to it. But that's not the case because she's still alive. Because they have them doing it
resurrection
inside
things. Yeah,
the thing. So what happens then? Like, does she live forever that way, or and she doesn't age because she is the
yeah,
supreme being? It's stuff like
yeah.
that people will have questions. Obviously, it's not a perfectly written movie by any means. Like, there's going
No,
to be loopholes here and there. Every movie has them. Um, but it's just one of those things where in this movie, I don't really care because I'm just watching it because it's such a fun movie to watch. those things don't really matter to me as much.
That's fair enough. Though, a thing I do before we sort of end the episode is, we talk all this positivity about the film. That's the whole point, positivity all the way through. But I want to have a healthy way of going the other side of it, which is I would always like to say, if there's one thing about this film that you could readily accept criticism for, what would that be?
Well, the numerous plot holes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of plot holes. There's just stuff why is Zorg the one talking to this evil being? Why did the evil being decide Zorg should be the one that it communicates with? These things aren't explained. We don't know these things.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and in a way that kind of leaves it open to theory, which is fine, I think, as well. So, not everything needs to be explained. So I suppose that's a healthy thing to sort of have as a problem. But yeah, there are other things as well that do sort of kind of fall by the wayside to allow for the cinematic sort of structure to shine through. Especially in terms of the comedic choreography of it all. I think, and that's fine because you get better jokes and better sights out of it by having these great scenes like we've mentioned, in terms of the shootout, in terms of the farces with the ticket and stuff like that. It's just, it makes for a better film. And really after that, you're like, well, I felt good watching that film because of that. And that's all you want out of it, isn't it, really?
Yeah, well, what about you? Some of the negatives that you found?
At first, it was going to just be that, being very highly sexualized in a way was interesting for a movie that's supposed to be a 12. Given how sanitized we are now by its 12s, it was a bit shocking. But to be honest, I think that's just part and parcel of everything now, especially with the sort of what you were saying, about how Corbin Dallas ends up being, feeling about her and how we've discussed about the character and how he can be feeling that through his own mindset. So that's not so much a problem. There's a couple of things that don't land as well in terms of stereotypes and things. I think as great as that whole thing with the food delivery thing, that the character is a bit very stereotypically Asian, in that way that is like that, which in some ways you could sort of excuse as being, it's just that's the idea, he's doing it for customers' sake sort of thing. But at the same time, it's like that. It feels a bit off. Yeah, there are a couple of things like that, but a lot of that is just off the time. And you kind of have to accept that as being what it is at that rate, rather than, it is the film for what it is. It's a small moment, but it's that one thing that was it is no Mickey Rooney in Breakfast at Tiffany's, but it's still a bit strange all the same. Yeah, I mean, again, minuscule thing, in the grand scheme of that. A film that, having not watched for many, many years and having a very shrug your shoulders sort of view on it before I watched it this time, I'm really glad to have come back to it and really felt endeared by it. It's probably great to watch it now in a modern blockbuster period, because it kind of reminds you of all the things you kind of get away with. And that goes back to what you were saying about plot holes and things like that. It's they're there, who cares? It's still telling a fun story, all the same. So who cares if these little things don't make sense? I think that's been one of the biggest problems of modern blockbusters, is we get too caught up in trying to explain everything, and they still end up having things you can't explain or things that don't make sense because you try and take it down too narrow a path. You leave it open, ambiguous things that don't make sense. It doesn't matter. You think of many classic films when you get those nitpicky videos about what they don't do right and what doesn't work. Why doesn't it matter? Because the adventure is fun and you're there for the journey like that. It doesn't really matter how it works in the same way. You have something in it that is open to interpretation. I think this is
this is one of those movies where if it came out today, I feel like it'd have a 28 on Rotten Tomatoes from critics and a 90 on the audience score.
I mean, it's that Valerian. Valerian's a good example, isn't it? I think of that, where it bombed really as a film. So it was telling the same thing. But yeah, the fact this film has become not a cult classic, it's become really revered for something beyond its box office.
It holds up. It holds up to this day.
Yeah, it really does.
Even its CG is actually for the little amounts of it that it had.
Yeah,
it really holds up, and it uses it in the best way. Yeah,
it really does. So yeah, that's great. Yeah, I've had a fantastic chat with you here, Garri, about this. This has been a nice surprise, I have to say. Covering a film, and this is exactly what I wanted out of this podcast: is to maybe come to a film I hadn't seen before, a film I hadn't appreciated or seen in a long time.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. Like I watched it and I saw so many actors in that movie who are now gone.
Yeah.
This movie came out in '97. Tommy Lester is gone. Ian Holm is gone. Luke Perry is gone. It's kind of crazy to see so many of these guys and Bruce Willis essentially, with
everything's happened to him.
His health. Yeah, it's really sad. But
it's. But at the same time, it's a really nice magical snapshot of a time and a place, and it really does just feel like late '90s in a way that I love. Just in so many ways. I go back to what I was saying about Jean-Paul Gaultier and that whole Eurotrash thing. That is late '90s to me as much as this is. It feels connected in so many ways, even though they are very different beasts. But great stuff. That is it for this episode of Our Punch Drunk Loves. I'll be back with another guest and another film soon. Until then, go show your punch drunk love for your favourite films.